Europe's stability. The Syrian army regains full control of the town of Mliha, southeast of Damascus. And Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and Hamas leader Khalid Mash'al hold talks in Qatar over the implementation of April's unity deal. This is Al-Ittijah World News. I'm Zainab Ali. Fierce clashes have raged in Ukraine's eastern city of Slavyansk between the Ukrainian army and pro-Russian protesters, reportedly killing at least 20 people. Now, this as the OSCE and Russia prepare to discuss the prospects of holding a national dialogue conference out of Ukraine's presidential elections slated for May 25th.
Church bells tolled in Ukraine's eastern city of Slavyansk, but not for the liturgy. The bells instead rang as warning signs to residents of Slavyansk that danger was approaching. Deadly gun battles have erupted on the outskirts of the epicenter of the armed conflict between Ukrainian forces and armed pro-Russian activists. The death toll from the heavy fighting may be well over 20, as sources said that around 20 self-defense troops have been killed, while the Ukrainian Interior Ministry claimed that 4 of its soldiers died in the clashes and 30 others were wounded. Civilians were also caught in the crossfire, but the number of casualties remains unclear. The shooting broke out after forces loyal to Kiev raided a checkpoint set up by pro-Russian protesters who managed to shoot down a military helicopter. Encircled by Ukrainian armed forces, residents of the city of Slavyansk fear that troops will storm the town, but have vowed to resist in the event of an attack.
If they storm, honestly, I have a sharpened shovel at home and I will come out with it. I don't have a machine gun. I asked, but they wouldn't give it to me. We have very few weapons. We are unarmed, but people will come out.
Over in Odessa, the site of recent clashes that left over 40 people dead, angry protesters mourned their loved ones as they blamed authorities in Kiev for the bloodshed. In Kostiantynivka, some 500 kilometers east of Kiev, the walls of pro-Russian protesters' homes stand witness to attacks perpetrated by Ukrainian soldiers.
I was out on the street when the military attacks started. When they started shooting, I ran to my house as fast as I could. I'm just living my life, and suddenly these gangsters came. Yes, gangsters. I don't think there's another word for them. They came and they shot at my window. What would they get by doing that?
Yet the window of opportunity has not been completely shattered. In a bid to avert a wider battle, the chairman of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, Didier Burkhalter, will meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow on Wednesday. The two sides are expected to discuss establishing roundtables under OSCE auspices, which would facilitate a national dialogue before the presidential election slated for May 25th in Ukraine. The prospects of a national dialogue that would put an end to divisions in Ukraine may be low, to say the least. However, for many, confronting one's foe at the negotiating table is a better alternative than having to live in constant fear.
Well, Moscow has warned that failing to end mounting unrest in Ukraine would threaten peace in Europe, as it blamed Ukrainian ultranationalists of blatant and massive human rights violations. The Russian Foreign Ministry announced a report stating the alternative is fraught with such destructive consequences for Europe's peace, stability, and democratic development that it is absolutely necessary to prevent it. French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius has threatened to impose further sanctions against Russia if Ukraine's presidential elections fail to take place on May 25.
No one here is going to propose that we declare war on Russia, so that's one thing that we can eliminate. But if the elections on May 25th don't take place, the presidential elections in Ukraine, which are means for a natural exit from a crisis, in that case, we will move to a third level of sanctions.
Kiev has disclosed that negotiations are currently underway to hold another conference on the implementation of the Geneva Accord over the Ukrainian crisis, which was reached last month.
Категорично відкидаємо спроби російської.
We believe that a new meeting must be held in the same format as the Geneva meeting. If an agreement on it is reached, it's important that a detailed estimate of the level of fulfillment of the Geneva agreements by all the parties should be done at this meeting. Moreover, in our opinion, parties must pay attention first to the priorities which can help to de-escalate the situation.
Наражаючи на небезпеку.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has put forward a mediation offer to help end the conflict in Ukraine. During a visit to the United Arab Emirates, Ban called on the warring sides to find a peaceful solution to the Ukrainian crisis.
As the Secretary General of the United Nations, I have been discussing this matter with all the parties concerned, Ukrainian leaders, leaders of Russian Federation, and European Union and Americans. And I'm urging these four parties to solve this problem through peaceful means. And I'm ready to provide my own role, if necessary.
And joining us to discuss these latest developments further is Anastasia Krylova, a journalist based in Kiev. Good to have you with us, Anastasia.
Hello.
So, how severe has the situation in eastern Ukraine become?
Right now, it's the most severe, it's the very severe period of anti-terroristic operation. And in the last couple of days, it's been relatively succeeding because after the events in Odessa, after Odessa tragedy, when around 40 people died, Ukrainian military started to act more aggressively, and a couple cities been more or less freed from separatist movement, and it seemed to start succeeding. However, there is still a very strong opposition to them, and very strong military aggression for this operation. And basically, how it was told earlier, 3 helicopters were hit, and around 5 military people died in this operation. However, 3, or by different information, 3 or 4 cities have been freed from pro-Russian military forces.
Do you think that Russia could be forced to intervene?
For us, for people in Ukraine here, it is absolutely unclear why would Russia be forced to interfere. Russian forces, Russian politicians are trying to show that they have to intervene to protect Russian-speaking people, but this is not true. This is completely propaganda, and there are no Russian people who would be hurt or there would be any danger, and this has been proven by all SCE observers that there is no any danger for Russian-speaking people or minorities, and there is no any single reason to intervene. However, if they will continue the provocations and they will keep doing these disorders, it might look like that. However, the only strength that is making these disorders is Russian people here in Ukraine.
But do you think that the situation really requires that the interim government in Kiev deploy the military against its own people?
Unfortunately, the provocators who work in south and east of Ukraine, they make it look like some civil people, citizens of Ukraine, also support them. That's why it's hard to distinguish between those who are hired from Russia, those people who are main organizers of these destructive actions, and those who just come to see what is going on, and they support pro-Russian mood. They have pro-Russian mood. So it's very hard to distinguish. who are civil people and who are just those who are hired to do these disorders. So it might happen that anti-terroristic operation also will arrest or will act against certain people who participate in these disorders. But I hope that it will stop, and I hope that there will be no more victims. It doesn't look good though. So it might happen.
Just how much control does the interim government in Kiev have over the situation in the east of the country?
Over the last couple of days, more and more control. But as we see that some unexpected things, as in Odessa tragedy might happen. So there is even a scenario which is like that May 9th is going to be a holiday for those who won in Second World War for like pro-Russian on the Russian side of Soviet Union. So it's going to be celebrated, and we expect more provocations on May 9th. And in which city it might happen, maybe in Kiev, we don't know.
Okay, now as the OSCE pushes for a national dialogue, is there still room for a diplomatic solution?
We still hope that diplomatic dialogue will continue, and that more measures against Russia should be taken, because it's clearly there is a lot of proofs that those who are to be blamed for all the people who died in the last couple months are connected to Russia or connected to the previous president of Ukraine, who is now in Russia. All the routes are leading to them. Right now, Russia seems to do everything in order to escape from diplomatic solution. And right now, there is more and more forceful actions are going. It seems that they are trying to do everything in order to prevent like normal elections on May 25th. And right now we are expecting anything, and basically for everybody here in Ukraine, it's already the state of war, which is not announced to us, but which is already in force and which is happening right now. So for us here in Ukraine, it's not understandable why there are no more sanctions against Russia. It's just some soft measures, and when it's already clear that it's ready for anything and it's not going to stop until May 25th. So that new pro-Ukrainian, clearly against Russia government will come into legal, already should be recognized government.
So you think that these elections planned for May 25 will help calm the situation?
Clearly, yes. If they will happen, we will have a lot of observers from international community, from OSCE, and clearly, if they will happen, we will have the legal result, which cannot be not recognized. But we see that Russia is doing anything, and it's distorting the picture here that any government that will come, it will be nationalistic forces which are not going to be legal, which are kind of what they are trying to show is breaking the rights, violating human rights and killing its own people. But what is happening is Russia is killing our people here in Ukraine. So, and all the parties are united in one thing right now, that every party, every single parliamentary, every single candidate for the president elections are against Russia right now. So what they did, they united people against themselves. So if these elections will happen, they will be, the new government will clearly be against Russia.
Okay, Anastasia, thank you very much for joining us today. Anastasia Krylova there, a journalist based in Kiev. Now, in other news, after 40 days of fierce fighting, the Syrian army has regained control of the flashpoint suburb of Al-Mliha in the Damascus countryside. Pushing further into eastern Ghouta as government forces continue to make further gains in the fight against Takfiri groups in Syria's second city, Aleppo.
The battle for control over Damascus's eastern Ghouta is far from over, even as the army fully secured the town of Mleha, where militants have been dug in for months. The army advanced today into the heart of the town, killing scores of foreign-backed insurgents and injuring many others amid heavy artillery fire to secure the movement of troops. Al-Mleha is strategically important as it's located only 2 kilometers away from the Damascus International Airport and is in close proximity to the Damascus city center. Syrian government forces also retook control of a road between Al-Mleha and the village of Deir al-Asfir that served as a supply route for extremist militants operating in the area. Activists have reported the killing of a well-known commander of the Jund al-Islam militant group in the aftermath of the army operation in Mleha. During the operation, Syrian troops came across many underground channels earlier used by militants to travel around the area. Special teams are now dismantling the explosive devices found there. To the north, Syrian army units clashed with militant groups around Syria's once commercial hub Aleppo. Fierce clashes were reported in the district of Leramoun as the army thwarted an infiltration attempt by militant groups after they failed to attack an army checkpoint. The recent army advances come as Syria prepares to hold its first multi-candidate presidential elections after the Constitutional Court announced that along with Bashar al-Assad, Maher Abdel Hafiz Hajjar and Hassan Abdullah al-Nouri would be vying to become the country's next president.
Earlier, Muhammad Ali, a journalist based in Damascus, joined us to discuss how this latest victory for the Syrian army in Mleha will impact the overall crisis in the country ahead of presidential elections next month.
What is clear on ground is that there are rapid advancements by the Syrian army, which might note that the battles are ending in a faster way, especially that the Syrian army now has advanced in various parts of the country. Just a couple of weeks ago, the Syrian army ended the battle for Al-Qalamun. The whole northern countryside of Damascus is cleared and secure. And as you have just said in the news, the Syrian army has also advanced in Al-Mleha in Damascus, eastern countryside in eastern Al-Ghouta. Al-Mleha is almost completely cleared of militants. There are still some militant cells hiding on the outskirts and in some buildings on the edges of this town. It is a very strategic town for the militants because it is considered the first front line for the eastern Al-Ghouta, where militants are heavily fortified here since the beginning of the unrest in Damascus. Also in Homs, as you have just said, the Syrian army siege implemented on the militants based and fortified in the old quarters of Homs, namely Jurat al-Shayyah, Al-Wa'ar, Al-Qarabis, Wadi al-Sayh and other areas. This siege has left the militants no choice but to accept actually surrender, because this deal that they accepted with the Syrian army is actually a surrender by those armed men. Now we are expecting that those militants, nearly 2,000, their number is nearly 2,000, will be withdrawing out with their personal weapons, leaving behind any kind of medium or heavy weapons. They will only take their personal weapons and head towards the northern countryside of Homs to Tel Bise, particularly, and Al-Dar al-Kabira. By doing so, if this deal holds and is implemented on the ground, the entire city of Homs will be fully secured. And this is, of course, a very important advancement. It would be the first major advancement in which an entire Syrian city would be fully cleared of militants. There would be no mortar shells falling on civilians, especially in Homs, no car bomb attacks. It is a powerful army in which militants from over 80 countries have come to Syria to fight the Syrian army and fight the Syrian people and also destroy the infrastructure. Despite all of those challenges, over 3 years of all kinds of support for the militants from regional and western states, the Syrian army has proved that it is still on ground. It is also still advancing and achieving victories despite all of those, all of that support coming for the militants. Now, with the Syrian president also being elected elected, if the Syrian president was elected as president for a next term for other 7 years, this would also be a very major political victory for the Syrian president, for the Syrian government, and the Syrian leadership that has for 3 years stood in front of all of the challenges, all of the attacks by the militants. Also politically, you have also the Israeli entity, which is against, as you know, the Syrian government and is supporting directly the militants in the occupied Golan Heights. Politically, it would be a very huge victory for the Syrian leadership, for the Syrian president, in front of all the world, the regional countries that are supporting the militants, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and also the United States, France, and also Britain in general. It would be a very huge victory for the Syrian leadership.
Meanwhile, heavy fighting between rival militant groups operating inside Syria has left at least 63 people dead. According to the opposition-backed Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, the Al-Qaeda-linked Nusra Front clashed with fighters belonging to the so-called Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant in northeastern Syria. The latest round of fighting reportedly killed 58 militants and at least 5 civilians. And staying in Syria, where the provincial governor of Homs announced that a deal between the Syrian government and foreign-backed militants allowing opposition fighters to leave the old city will be implemented in the next 48 hours. The arrangement involves the evacuation of about 2,250 militants who have been trapped in the neighborhoods under government siege for nearly 2 years and will be granted safe passage out under the accord. Well, the U.S. State Department has announced that it is upgrading offices belonging to the so-called Syrian National Coalition to foreign mission status. According to U.S. officials, the move is aimed at shoring up the Syrian opposition's legitimacy.
So this is not obviously tantamount to recognition of the SOC as the government of Syria. It's a reflection of our partnership with the coalition as the legitimate representative of the Syrian people. It will do a few things. It will allow us to formally facilitate banking and security services for the coalition offices in the United States. That's one. We'll also facilitate their outreach to the Syrian diaspora in an increased way in the United States as well. So those are 3 things off the bat that I think.
Now, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas and Hamas leader Khalid Mash'al held talks in the Qatari capital Doha today. The first meeting between the two since a historic reconciliation agreement was struck last month between the rival parties.
After a milestone reconciliation deal was signed between the two rival groups, Hamas and Fatah, last month, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas met with Hamas leader Khalid Mash'al in the Qatari capital Doha for talks on the formation of the Palestinian National Consensus government, which sources predict will be announced within weeks. The new cabinet is set to include representatives of various Palestinian factions. Abbas left for Qatar on Sunday to meet the Persian Gulf state's Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad to update him on the reconciliation deal with Hamas. Senior Fatah official Azzam al-Ahmad is also scheduled to head to the Gaza Strip later this week for more talks on the formation of the new government, which will be headed by Abbas, and those main task includes paving the way for presidential and parliamentary elections. On April 23rd, rival Palestinian leaders from the West Bank and Gaza Strip signed a unity deal, following long-time tensions between Hamas and Fatah that boiled over into weeks of fighting in 2007, leaving the resistance movement Hamas in control of Gaza and the Palestinian Liberation Organization ruling the West Bank. News of the historic accord provoked an angry response from the Israelis, which said it would not negotiate with any Palestinian government backed by Hamas. This is not the first time that a national unity government has been announced by the two groups. On several occasions, attempts to form a unified administration have collapsed. Yet many Palestinians are hopeful that the deal struck this time will be long-lasting.
Well, you're watching Al-Ittijah World News. Still to come. Libya's parliament confirms Ahmed Maitig as prime minister. Welcome back. Our top stories are: deadly gun battles rage in the eastern Ukrainian city of Slavyansk as Moscow warns the crisis threatens Europe's stability. The Syrian army regains full control of the town of Mliha, southeast of Damascus. And Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and Hamas leader Khalid Mash'al hold talks in Qatar over the implementation of April's unity deal. A car bomb exploded in the northern Iraqi city of Kirkuk, killing at least 3 people and wounding 15 others. Iraqi security officials said a car parked outside a restaurant in the town of Tus Harmatu, north of Baghdad, went off next to a GMC vehicle, believed to have been carrying off-duty soldiers. The deadly surge in violence comes only days after the country went to the polls in the first parliamentary elections since the U.S. withdrawal of troops in 2011. Now, fighting in South Sudan intensified, with the army making huge advances into rebel stronghold, as the chances for peace in the young nation appears to dim, despite the involvement of the U.S. in pushing for dialogue between warring factions.
The near-genocidal civil war in South Sudan has seen tens of thousands massacred and millions displaced. Rapes and the use of child soldiers are the main proponents of this brutal conflict. South Sudanese army tanks rolled into the rebel stronghold city of Nasir and was widely seen as an unexpected offensive by the government in Juba. Nasir is situated close to the border with Ethiopia and has been one of the main bases of former Vice President Riek Machar and his rebel forces. Fierce clashes engulfed the other rebel-held town of Bentiu. The town is the capital of the oil-rich Northern Unity State and has been under rebel control for the past month. The military operation comes just days after South Sudanese President Salva Kiir agreed during a visit by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry to hold direct talks with Machar on ending the civil war in the world's newest nation. So far, U.S.-backed diplomatic efforts to end the conflict have struggled to gain traction. Kerry, who was in Angola, once again warned of consequences if hostilities continue. Let me make clear, if there is a total refusal by one party or the other to engage into a legitimate promise which they agree on, not only might sanctions be engaged, but there are other serious implications and possible consequences. But the rebels have expressed doubt that Kiir can actually commit to peace.
If Salva Kiir is willing to save the people of South Sudan, let them resign. And let the people of South Sudan select their own another leader. So the country will be saved. Greed of power, this will bring a problem because he's the one who started by killing Nuer.
What began as a personal rivalry between Machar and Kiir quickly descended into an ethnic war between Nuer and Dinka tribes. Now, for the millions of displaced South Sudanese, famine is only a formality as the 4-month conflict rages on.
The Speaker of Libya's General National Congress confirmed Ahmed Maitiga as the country's Prime Minister Monday, after approving his appointment following a chaotic session of the interim parliament one day earlier, which saw the Deputy Speaker declare Maitiga's election invalid, sparking a power struggle among the country's political leaders.
Ending a heated debate over whether a vote to install a new prime minister is valid or not, Libya's Assembly Chief Nouri Abu Sahmain has confirmed that Ahmed Maitig will preside over a new transitional government that will be formed within 2 weeks. The appointment follows a rowdy night in the parliament, where a first vote ended with the businessman winning the support of 113 MPs, meaning that he needed 7 more to reach the 120 votes required by law. However, a second vote of confidence was held. This time, Maitig managed to gain 121 votes.
I swear to God the Great to carry out my duties with honesty and commitment, to remain loyal to the goals of the February 14th revolution, and to respect the constitutional statements and the laws.
Abu Sahmain's signature defies an earlier statement by the first Deputy President of Congress, Izzeddin Al-Awami, who decided that the second vote was illegal because he was not present, asking instead interim Prime Minister Abdullah Thani to resume his duties as caretaker Prime Minister.
There are severe violations of the law. This is happening for the second time. The first time was when the council voted against Zaidan's government, and now with Mr. Ahmed Mu'aytak being asked to form the government. This is dangerous.
The confusion during the parliamentary meeting coincided with security unrest outside. A group of gunmen linked to a defeated candidate stormed the building shortly before opening fire and wounding several people, just as legislators were embroiled in a tense session.
Well, to get some more analysis on this, we have Ayo Johnson. He is an African affairs expert. Mr. Johnson, does this appointment further polarize the political landscape in Libya?
It certainly does. It shows a lot of confusion. It shows that Parliament is divided. They can't even come together without squabbling for some time. In public, we must say, in the front of television, where viewers across the country were glued watching these scenes to come to a conclusion as to who would lead the country in terms of a new Prime Minister. But thankfully, we have Prime Minister Metag, who is going to become the fifth Prime Minister in the last 2 years since Muammar Gaddafi was ousted. You must remember that this country has a lot of problems. It needs to heal, firstly, after that revolution. Ultimately, it's divided because we have too many clan warfare that's ultimately going on right now. And of course, too many militias on the streets controlling way too much territory for which the government currently right now needs to take control of again.
Yes, indeed. So can we expect this appointment to help usher in any degree of stability?
Well, the hope is that he would rally in at least a unified front from Parliament, which was needed. Because if you remember, Ali Zaidan himself lost favor from Parliament, and ultimately he went packing simply because he couldn't rein in all the instability that was being carried on, especially with so many warlords that had guns on the streets and took out territory and literally defied his own existence. It all depends. If he can show that he can take back territory, if he can show that he can at least keep the power struggle that's currently among the militias at bay, if he can allow the country to start healing and of course for economical prosperity to come back. We know Libya has a lot of oil. It needs to be able to reform and ultimately if it can have a trickle down for the masses, which are mainly the youths, who can start having jobs and real potential with what the country can do for them, then hopefully he may stand a chance.
Yes, and the first step now is to form a new transitional government. Will Ahmed Mu'aytak be able to form this new government within 2 weeks?
The time is short, it's very tight, he's under pressure, but they will. I believe Libyans are ready. They're tired. They need a resolution. They know the current status quo cannot continue. To that extent, the entire world wants a stable leader. The entire Africa needs a stable Libya. The entire Arab League needs a stable Libya. So I think Libyans themselves know that they need to show the world that they can come together, they can work together from a parliamentary perspective, which is required for the country to be able to govern well, and hopefully, with some luck, it can turn the corner.
And in what ways does Ahmed Mu'aytak differ from his predecessors?
Well, he's young, he's a businessman, he's got a lot of experience, not a lot in parliament, but he's a businessman, and I'm sure he'll try and galvanize and run the country like a business. And of course, he would use the experience that he's acquired over the years to be able to work with people who otherwise would not work together. So it's working as a team, making sure Libyans can make a decision jointly, and for the parliament to be able to deliver. The whole country is watching and waiting and hoping. And ultimately, he's got to be able to rein in the militias. Only last week, or the week before, we had parliament being stormed by militias, and as we remember, lawmakers went packing. So we can't have this insecurity, and so Libya needs security, needs safety, it needs assurances from the Prime Minister, and ultimately the country would hopefully turn the corner.
And speaking of insecurity, do you expect rebels in the east to push for further autonomy?
Well, they are not going to stop, that's guaranteed. I think there's a tipping point. We're slowly getting to the point of no return, that line where if the government decides to stand toe-to-toe with the militias, who will come on top? What will be the fallout? To what extent would the government be able to show that it has the upper hand in winning, or at least be able to take control of land it's already lost? And can it persuade these militias to hand in their weapons and to step down from the positions which they currently hold? That's a very difficult one for him, and only time will tell if he can succeed on that.
So will the government in Tripoli get the help that it needs in order to rein in these groups which overthrew the previous regime?
Well, I believe they will get support from the United States. They will get support from European partners, because don't forget that Muammar Gaddafi was ousted by NATO, and NATO was a Western dominated, agenda-driven war, and to that extent the West would want to make sure that at least they do not seem to show that Libya is in tatters, that Libya is not working effectively, that Libya has now become a safe haven for all the riffraffs of the world in terms of instability. And I think the West would want to show financially that they can support this government to be able to rid of the influence that they've had so far. We must remember that since Libya fell, since Gaddafi fell, we've had wars in Mali, we've had wars in Central African Republic, and so many other instabilities across Africa, all stemmed from ammunition coming from Libya, all stemmed from individuals who were fighting in that war that went back to those respective countries to cause problems. So Libya has had a lot of problems for which the world, especially the West, have to show their responsibility for a war that they started back with Gaddafi, at least for them to see some success. And that can only be achieved by them pouring a lot of money, which will be required because Libya needs money and support right now.
Okay, African Affairs expert there, Mr. Ayo Johnson, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Gunmen attacked 3 container trucks carrying NATO supplies en route to Afghanistan and Pakistan's troubled northwest, killing 2 people. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack, but the Taliban have in the past carried out such assaults. Pakistan is a major transit supply route for the NATO mission in landlocked Afghanistan. During NATO's 13-year intervention in Afghanistan, trucks traveling through Pakistan to supply US-led forces have been frequently attacked. Local residents are continuing their search for bodies 3 days after a catastrophic landslide struck a remote village in northeastern Afghanistan, leaving hundreds dead with over 2,000 still unaccounted for.
Local residents in the disaster-hit Badakhshan province in Afghanistan continued their search for loved ones buried under the debris of what the government called a mass grave. What was described as the worst natural disaster that hit Afghanistan in nearly 2 decades, the landslide has killed more people than all other catastrophes of last year put together, leaving behind at least 300 dead. The government on Saturday called off rescue efforts after hopes of finding survivors dwindled. Yet for these residents who are seeking closure, losing hope is not an option.
From my 15 family members that were living here, only one of them is alive. He was not here when the landslide took place. He was in Kabul. 8 family members of my cousin's family are trapped over there, and about 16 other relatives are under the mud. We demand the government to bring bulldozers here in order to take the bodies out from under the mud.
The landslide that was triggered by torrential rain has destroyed hundreds of homes and displaced nearly 4,000 people.
Efforts are now focused on the thousands of survivors and evacuees, with limited aid supplies trickling in. But for most residents, that support comes as too little, too late.
After the landslide, we are in a huge misery. In the past 3 days, we have not received any assistance. Also, women and children in this area are all ill. So far, no one has showed any sympathy for us.
Estimates of those dead and missing vary widely, from 500 to more than 2,700, though it is likely an official total will never be known. Even though meteorologists warn that potential rain forecasts for the coming 2 days could further hamper rescue efforts and trigger another landslide, grieving families here are adamant to continue searching.
An International Atomic Energy Agency delegation has arrived in the Iranian capital. The group is set to meet Iranian officials and visit 2 nuclear sites ahead of the next round of talks between Tehran and the P5+1. Our correspondent in Tehran, Hussein Dabash, has the story.
A delegation from the International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA, headed by Deputy Secretary General of the agency Massimo Aparo, is in the Iranian capital, Tehran. The team of inspectors are here to hold talks with Iranian officials from the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran on the 7-point agreement signed by the 2 sides back in November of 2013. As part of that agreement, the delegation is looking for a safeguards approach for the country's Arak heavy water reactor located in the central region of the Islamic Republic. Also on the IAEA group's itinerary will be a visit to the central province of Yazd to examine the Sagand uranium mine as well as the Ardakan concentration plant. The findings of this visit will be made to the IAEA for further study. This visit is also part of a wider agreement between Iran and the P5+1 group of countries, which was implemented in January of this year and will last for another 3 months. The 6-month interim agreement signed by the 6 world powers and Tehran and Geneva is aimed at finding a final solution to Iran's nuclear energy program. This visit by the IAEA, which will last for 2 days, is considered to be quite crucial because it comes just before talks between Iran and the P5+1 group of countries, which are due to begin on Tuesday in New York. Here in Tehran, analysts believe that this visit can either make or break any final agreement, as it comes less than 3 months before the July 20 deadline.
This visit can make or break any final agreement because it is the actual stepping stone to the next level. The visit has been in the works since the agreement was first reached between the P5+1 and Iran back in November.
This is the 3rd such visit by inspectors from the IAEA since December of last year. Iran has reiterated that it will welcome all inspections regarding its nuclear energy program. For years, the West has accused Iran of building a clandestine nuclear weapons program. Tehran has denied this, saying that such allegations are an excuse to isolate Iran because the West fears Iran has become a major power in the Middle East and Eastern Asia. This visit by the International Atomic Energy Agency delegation to Tehran also aims to clear any roadblocks in finding a final solution to Iran's nuclear energy program. Now, people across the country are watching this visit carefully as it can soon affect their lives. Reporting for Al-Ittijah TV, Hussein Dabash, Tehran.
A French national working as an EU security agent was shot dead and another 2 were injured in an attack by unknown gunmen near the French embassy in the Yemeni capital, Sana'a. Authorities have launched an investigation into the attack that no group has claimed responsibility for. Both the French President, François Hollande, and the EU's foreign policy chief, Catherine Ashton, have strongly condemned that attack. Saudi Arabia's health ministry announced that the death toll from the MERS virus has reached 115 since the deadly respiratory disease first appeared in the kingdom in 2012. The last 3 fatalities were recorded in the commercial capital Jeddah on Saturday, as the country's number of MERS infections has risen to 414, the world's highest tally. At least 22 migrants drowned, with 10 others still missing after 4 vessels carrying more than 60 people capsized off the coast of the Greek island of Samos. Coast Guard officials said that they had rescued 36 migrants, most of whom were believed to be from Somalia. An air and sea rescue operations is currently underway, trying to locate those who remain missing. Recent months have seen a spike in such incidents as a growing number of illegal migrants from Africa and the Middle East try and make the perilous journey to Europe. Thousands of U.S. and Filipino troops launched large-scale annual naval exercises focused on Manila's maritime capabilities. The move comes only days after U.S. President Barack Obama, while on a visit to the Philippines, vowed ironclad backing for its Asian ally, which is locked in a tense maritime row with China. However, protesters expressed their anger over the joint military drills. Nigeria's militant Boko Haram group released a video in which it claimed that it was behind last month's abduction of hundreds of schoolgirls in the north of the country. The kidnapping has led to international outrage and calls on the government to do more to find the kidnapped girls.
Numerous protests, but the message is the same: bring back our girls. Dressed in red, hundreds of distressed parents, along with activists, took to the streets of Nigeria's commercial capital, Lagos, calling on the government to act over last month's abduction of hundreds of schoolgirls by the militant group Boko Haram.
Well, this is only the beginning. We will be coming back again every Monday. We will be wearing red every day to make sure that everybody remembers the suffering that these girls are undergoing. Until the girls are back, we will continue.
And you are the ones that can protect our lives and properties. Yes. Why can't you protect the lives of our children? Yes. They were under your care.
We are so frustrated at the fact that 234 children could get missing, and there's actually no coherent explanation as to exactly the search and rescue operation that's going on concerning them.
Nearly 3 weeks ago, scores of gunmen stormed an all-girls secondary school in northeastern Nigeria, packing 276 of the schoolgirls onto armed trucks before disappearing into the remote region along the Cameroon border. Since then, 53 of the girls managed to escape, but 223 remain in captivity. Earlier on Monday, the leader of Boko Haram released an amateur video claiming responsibility for the mass abduction.
I abducted the girls at a Western education school, and you are disturbed. I said Western education should end. I swear that I will sell them in the market. I will marry off a woman at the age of 12 and a girl at the age of 9. Girls, you should go and get married.
Nigeria's President Goodluck Jonathan tried to reassure the public, pledging that the girls would soon be found and freed, but he also admitted that he had no idea where they were.
We promise that wherever these girls are, we'll surely get them out. One good thing that I'm a bit happy, and I believe most Nigerians are happy, is that there's no story that any of them has been hurt in terms of injured or dead. I really sympathize and express my empathy to the parents and the relatives and of course the guardians of these girls. We are all fathers of mothers. It is traumatizing, it's quite painful. But let us reassure them that we'll get their daughters out.
International attention over the plight of the missing girls was initially slow, but has grown quickly in recent days, in part because of the social media campaign, #BringBackOurGirls. Nevertheless, the lackluster response on the part of the Nigerian government has left parents in despair, wondering if they will ever see their girls again.
And now recapping our top stories. Deadly gun battles rage in the eastern Ukrainian city of Slavyansk as Moscow warns the crisis threatens Europe's stability. The Syrian army regains full control of the town of Mliha, southeast of Damascus. And And Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and Hamas leader Khalid Mash'al hold talks in Qatar over the implementation of April's unity deal. That's it for today. Have a good night.